Hi, this is Roger Conrad. I'm editor of Utility Forecaster, a newsletter covering the essential service industries, communications, energy, and water. And what I want to talk to you about today is just the way the sector is performing, as well as some of the opportunities involved in it. Right now we're looking at a market where everything is somewhat choppy. I think it's, again, very important to pursue a strategy that looks at fundamentals, particularly of how businesses are being run, and how they're standing up to three basic challenges. One being rising cost of raw materials. Two being, of course, the big question, what's going on with the U.S. economy, which is definitely weakening on a lot of fronts. And then number three being generally tight credit market conditions, even though interest rates are relatively low. Now, how companies are faring relative to those three big challenges, basically determining how they're doing. And utilities are doing very well on that. We've had 5 years of deleveraging, basically cutting operating risk, cutting debt. So you're coming from a pretty good place there, and they've been considered to be safe havens throughout the bear market, which really began about a year ago. One of the things that one of the hallmarks I think we've seen across the board, and particularly as second quarter earnings come out, is that companies' earnings are generally holding up. There have been some erosion based on some of the weakness in the economy, particularly when you talk about communications, water, and electricity. You're talking about housing starts as having a big impact on customer growth, revenues, and earnings. But by and large, we're seeing companies really hold up well, and particularly impressively, I think, is the fact that you look at demand for some of the unregulated services, because these are not purely regulated businesses anymore, but you're seeing some of those parts of the business, which a lot of people thought could be vulnerable with the economy weakening, really holding up well. Calling attention to a couple of sectors that I think are kind of exciting right now. One would be telecommunications, which a lot of people have been saying, and you read this in commentary, you see it with a lot of the people who are quoted most frequently. Before you get into the earnings season in telecommunications, a lot of doomsday talk, a lot of chatter about how sales are dropping off, how demand for some of these services they're offering, wireless service in particular, things that are data related or entertainment related that are communicated over wireless phones. And we've seen basically an acceleration of this type of business. So, contrary to some of the expectations, which were that consumers would be cutting off some of this business and cutting into sales, has not happened. So I think that's created a very strong opportunity, particularly in the largest communications companies like Verizon or AT&T or Comcast, really the giants of the sector. Very strong growth. Comcast does not have a wireless business, but it's seeing the same kind of numbers come up in its broadband business, and particularly what that means is selling people who get their basic connections from them to digital TV service, to telephone service, to fast broadband internet service. Again, great numbers on all these. You may hate them as your providers of service, but they're very good in terms of their businesses and how they're responding to the recession. The other thing the other area that I think is very interesting right now would be electricity companies. And here you have a tremendous growth business. A lot of money is going to have to be spent, on the order of about $1.5 trillion over the next 20 years. And the challenge is can these companies recover what investment they make, either in regulated rates or in the unregulated part of their business? And I think the really encouraging thing is the unregulated part of their businesses are still very much thriving. You look at companies that are involved in the wind business, for example. They're still putting up windmills pretty much anywhere they want. They, of course, enjoy favorable regulation and favorable government treatment, and demand for power continues to grow. And I think, coming into next year, where we are going to get some carbon regulation of some form, coal-fired and other types of businesses, particularly coal, power plants of that nature, the cost is going to be rising considerably, and that makes wind that much more exciting. Nuclear power also, although I think there the opportunity is pretty much confined to the existing players, because it's the existing sites are going to be where you'll see new plants. Not a lot of greenfield is even being proposed. Obviously, there's a lot of opposition, to locating a nuclear plant in areas that aren't used to it. But in those areas where they've had nuclear plants, you do have quite a bit of support. And there's some hearings going on right now in Maryland where you're seeing where if this had occurred 10 years ago, you would have seen tremendous opposition. Still see some opposition, but you're also seeing a lot of support, including from groups or people that are very concerned about carbon. And of course, nuclear power does not emit any carbon, so it fits in well with that. Opportunities there. I think on the wind power side, we have seen some of these stocks come off a little bit. A company called FPL Group, which is based in Florida. Their utility side has suffered a little bit from the slowdown in that state, some of the slowdown in housing and so forth. But if you look at their second quarter earnings, the unregulated part of that business, the wind power part, actually the nuclear power part as well, has been doing very well, picking up the slack, and so the overall numbers have been very, very strong. So again, a very, very strong picture there for that group with regard on the unregulated side. The regulated side, of course, it boils down to the states and the relations with regulators, and Florida has tended to be one of the better areas there as well. So that's my message for today. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to speaking to you next time.